Jesus said in John chapter 4, "But the hour is coming and now is when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father," this is this amazing revelation, "for the Father is seeking." The Father is seeking those who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. And so we begin to understand that if we have any desire for God whatsoever, any desire to be near Him, any desire to even begin to know Him, any desire whatsoever, if there's a spark, just a little tiny spark of desire to know Him or to know who He is or to relate with Him closer, anything at all, any level at all, any level of desire that came from Him, that is an announcement of what's already in His heart for you. When you begin to wake up and begin to become aware that there's something bigger going on, there's something wonderful that's happening, there's something beautiful that's changing, or there's some kind of, you feel some kind of an influence of the Spirit of the Lord or of the presence of the Lord inside your heart, inside your life, even if it's a thought in your mind. I wonder if He really loves me. That came from Him. It didn't come from you. He plants these things inside of us. These are trigger mechanisms that He can trigger the desire inside of our hearts and inside of our lives to begin to match the desire that's in His heart. Listen to this. This is out of the Song of Songs. "Let Him kiss me with the kisses of His mouth. For your love," listen to the pronouns, "for your love is better than wine. Because of the fragrance of your good ointments," your perfume. "Your name is as ointment poured forth." It's like perfume that's spilled, it's poured out. It just fills the room. "Therefore, the virgins love you. Draw me away, and we will run after you. The King has brought me into His chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in you. We will remember your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you." Everything is centered on Him. This is the heart of one who is running after Him and after Him alone. And she's not going to be satisfied with anything other than Him. He's the one. It's not what He's got in His pocket that He can give her. It's who He is. And she has this amazing thing. Look at in Song of Songs, chapter 2, she says, "The voice of my beloved, behold, He comes leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold." Chapter 2, verse 9, he says, "Behold, He stands behind our wall. He is looking through the windows, gazing through the lattice. My beloved spoke and said to me, Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away." I don't know that we think about God like this. I will make some confessions that will embarrass my wife. From the first week that we were married, I have to confess to you that I watched her. There were times that I positioned myself in one room to watch her reflection off of a mirror in the bathroom. I wanted to watch her. I wanted to see her. I wanted to see what she was doing. I wanted to see how she was doing, whatever she was doing. Why? Because I love her. Couldn't take my eyes off of her. I have to confess to you that many, many, many times since that time, since that first week, it's not changed. I will sneak up on her and I will stand off to the side in a way that she cannot see me, but I can see her, and I love watching her. Why? Because of love. Because I want to look at her. I want to see her. I want to watch her, and I want to watch her in a way that she's not aware that I'm watching her. But it never ceases to fail. I would just about bet you that any man in this room has done that with his wife. I don't even see one guy nodding his head. You're afraid. You think I'm going to trick you or something. It's not a trick. It's the truth. Ross? All the time. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Jesus did that. And not only did he do that, he still does this. There's this wonderful, wonderful old hymn. I love it. We don't sing it anymore. We don't sing these kinds of things anymore. I'm so sorry that we don't. I wish that we did. The lyrics are this: standing somewhere in the shadows, you'll find Jesus. He's the one who really cares and understands. Standing somewhere in the shadows, you will find him, and you will know him by his nail-pierced hands. God positions himself in such a way in our life, if you can capture this image. He positions himself in our lives just off to the side, just out of clear recognition. And he oftentimes stands there, and he oftentimes is waiting for you, and he's waiting for me to do something that every one of us as human beings can do, and probably do more times than we can even count, and that is we can feel his eyes on us. How many of us, virtually everybody in this room, has been in a crowd of people, I mean a big crowd of people, but you felt that somebody in that crowd was looking at you, and you looked over your shoulder and you caught them. They were looking at you, and your eyes met, and they looked away. Yes? It's all happened, hasn't it? So we can feel the eyes of human beings. I want to tell you that we can actually come into the place where there's a sensitivity in our heart and our spirit as we're seeking him, that we can begin to feel his gaze and the pleasure of his gaze upon our hearts and upon our lives. He's waiting. He's watching. He's looking. He's searching. He's hoping. He's hoping just for the moment where our lives are interrupted and we turn and we see him for who he is. And suddenly, I mean, she gives this testimony. He came leaping upon the mountain, skipping upon the hills, and he was coming to my house, and I didn't even know it. And he came, and he was standing outside, and he was looking at me through the window. Imagine Jesus doing this. Imagine Jesus coming to your house and standing on the outside of your house, looking through the window and watching you. It's not an imagination. It actually happens. We're not alone. We're not even far from him at all. In fact, Paul says in the book of Acts that in him we live and move and have our being. We're so close. We're closer than close. Truth of the matter is, the very air we breathe is full of his presence. But he's wanting more than just that. He's wanting an engaged heart. That's what he's wanting. It's what's in his heart. He desires that we would desire him even more. It's this unveiling of a divine heart. It's this unveiling of the heart of the Father. It's this unveiling of the heart of the bridegroom. It's this unveiling of a heart of love that we never dreamed. I've said it thousands of times before. I'll probably, by God's grace, say thousands of times from this day forward in my life. And that is this: if we could somehow look inside of the heart of God, we would be shocked at how much he loves us. I mean, we would be shocked. We would be embarrassed. In fact, usually when you see at that level of revelation, when you somehow, some way are able to look inside of his heart and you actually see or just even catch a glimpse of that level of his love for you or for me or for our hearts and for our lives, when we begin to see that, there's something in us, that this human twisted thing that's in us that would say, no, that can't be. He can't. That arises out of this thing inside of us that was corrupted. We're still coming out of it. We're still being healed. That thing that would say inside of us, no, he can't love me like that, because if he really knew me. A while back I gave you an axiom. An axiom is a statement that cannot be argued. It's just so perfectly true that you can't argue against it. That's what an axiom is. Here's an axiom. God knows everything about everything. We don't know everything about anything. And before you were ever born, and before I ever came, before I was ever conceived in my mother's womb, He knew of every day of every failure, every sin, every rebellion, every lust, He knew every single thing before I ever did it. And He chose me on purpose, with intent, because He knows. He knows. He redeems us for plan A, and plan A is love. And it's nothing less than the love of God for our hearts and our lives. And His desire, sorry to bother you, who's yawning? Didn't mean to bore you. Love is plan A. He's calling. We can go through the scriptures. He looks through the windows, gazing through the lattice. You can go over to the New Testament, to the road, to the two men on the road of Emmaus. After the crucifixion of Christ, and they're walking along the road, and suddenly Jesus catches up to them, and they never saw Him coming. He just suddenly popped into their lives. And do you know what He did? He hid Himself. And they did not know who He was. And He starts asking them questions out of the blue. Well, why are you guys so sad? And one of them, whose heart was so in love with Jesus, turned to Him and says, "Are you a stranger? Are you a stranger in Jerusalem? Don't you know what's been going on?" He was in love with Jesus, but he really didn't know who Jesus was, because He referred to Jesus as a prophet. And He was a prophet. He was the prophet. He is prophet, priest, and king. But they only understood it in human terms. He was a prophet. He was a good man. He was really helping us. We were really making some headway. We were going to change a nation. And then they died. Then they killed Him, and He's dead. He's gone. And Jesus is standing there listening to every single word that come out of the man's mouth. And He let them finish their understanded oratory and speak out all the things, these mighty things that they knew. He was patient. He listened. Their eyes were held by the Spirit of God. They couldn't have known who He was because He was standing on the outside looking through the window, gazing through the lattice work. Just His eyes were shining through, but something was happening in those men's hearts. He was there, but they didn't know it. He was alive, but they didn't have a clue. They thought it was a rumor. They didn't really understand. They didn't really know. I have a sneaky suspicion we don't know as much as we think we know. I've got a sneaky suspicion that we live our lives with a lot of questions. And He comes leaping upon the mountains and skipping upon the hills to answer the questions. And He answers them not with words of academic understanding. He answers them with His presence. He answers them with His eyes. He answers them with His heartbeat. He answers them with the glory of unveiling Himself before us. He wants to reveal Himself. He stands on the outside looking in so that somehow, some way, we can begin feeling His gaze. We can begin feeling in the eyes of the Lord Jesus Christ. And we feel like somebody's looking at us. We feel like somebody's drawing us and we don't know what it is. And we begin turning. We begin looking. He lives for that moment. He loves that moment. I love the moment when my wife would look in the mirror, and then all of a sudden she realizes that I'm looking at her, and she's looking at me in the mirror, and she looks at me and she kind of startles her, and then she says, "What are you doing?" I'm looking at you. Why? Because I want to. I like what I see. Does that make sense to you guys? You know why it makes sense to you? It's because it's truth. It's the way God is. He's looking at you and He's looking at me, even in our worst moments. Not with condemnation, but with a heart of love that says, just turn and look at me. It's going to be okay. Quit focusing on what you're focusing on. Just disengage from that and begin engaging with me, and it's going to be okay. I'll bring you out of this. But we don't think of Him like that. Too often we have believed a lie that He's looking for the opportunity just to punish us. Whether you say that out loud or whether you don't, every human being thinks that at some point in time in their lives. That's the corruption of sin. It takes away our ability to see clearly. But when we put on lenses from heaven, suddenly we begin seeing something that we never really saw before. And you read the story on the road to Emmaus. Their eyes were restrained, and he goes on, and then he does something. He unveils himself. He walked with them long enough until they got to their destination, and it looked as though that he was going to keep on walking. And they said, "No, don't go. Please stay here with us. Please. The day's long. It's already at the end of the day. Look, you don't need to go anywhere else. We want you to come in here with us." Do you have any idea of what it did to his heart when they did that? They compelled him. They took him. It's as if they took him by the arm and then they said, "You've got to come into our house. You've got to come here. There's something that you're saying, and we need what you're saying." He had revealed over that short distance the plan of the Father. He unveiled it from Moses through the prophets all the way up to the current day of what was really inside of his heart and the purpose for all of the things and why they happened the way they happened. Come in. Don't leave us. Stay here with us. We'll make room for you. We'll give you our bed. We'll sleep on the floor. You just come in. Stay in our house. We don't want to lose you. There's something that's happening here that we don't want to. We don't know what it is, but something's going on here, and we can't figure it out. But we know this. We know that it didn't happen until you showed up. Come in our house. And he did. And I can imagine that Jesus walked into that house with such a smile in his heart because he knew what was about to happen. And they gave him the place of honor, and they asked him to bless the bread. And he blessed it in such a way, and he broke it in such a way, and he looked at them in such a way that they immediately, bang, it's Jesus. He played dumb in order to be near to their hearts. He hid himself. He concealed himself until something was awakened on the inside of their own hearts that said, "We've got to have you. You've got to come with us." When you seek him, when you search for him and you seek him with all your heart, he says, "I will be found of you." I'm gonna bring you into the place where you start seeking so that I can jump out and say, "Here I am." He loves these things. We think hide and seek is a children's game, but God's the one that invented it. I hear people say all the time, I hear especially religious people, "Well, I don't play games with God." You liar. Let me throw you a knuckleball. God plays games with us on purpose. He likes it. He likes the drama. He likes the idea of hiding and then showing just enough to where my interest is piqued until I stop. It's what he did with Moses in the wilderness, isn't it? Here he was, burning in a bush. Fire in the wilderness. It was not an unusual thing. Lightning often struck in the wilderness. Bushes often burned in the wilderness. But there was something about this particular bush that Moses had to stop what he was doing and turn away and walk over here. And as soon as he walked toward the bush, God spoke. Moses. As soon as these guys said, you've got to come to our house, you've got to come inside, we're not going to let you go, you've got to be with us, you've got to stay with us, you've got to stay with us overnight. We need to hear more of what you've got to say. And sure enough, he comes in. The moment that their hearts turn to him, his heart is already there, waiting for the opportunity, waiting for the brief moment, ever how brief it is. You just crack the door open, honey, he'll come in. The door of desire, the door of longing, the door of seeking. That's the door he wants to come through. That's the one that only you and only I can open from the inside because it's got a unique handle on it. It only opens from the inside. It doesn't open from the outside. Mary at the tomb. You know the story. Two angels show up. What's the problem, Mary? She turned her back on the two angels. They've taken away my Lord. She'd rather have a dead Jesus than two living angels. In her mind. And Jesus does the most amazing thing that I've ever read or ever heard of. He stopped the most important duty of eternity. He is about to ascend to the Father. And there's this little girl down there that has fallen in love with him. As much as she knows and as much as she understands, she's fallen in love with him, and her heart is so distraught and she's so full of fear and she's so weeping and she's so torn up that she cannot be consoled. He sends two angels. They can't do the job. So what does he have to do? He has to stop what he's doing, and he pops into the situation. What's the problem? And she thinks he's the gardener. He hid himself again. And she opens up her heart and pours her heart out to the gardener, only to hear the voice coming from him that said, Mary. There was something in the timbre, the tone of his voice, that there was something of the glory of God. There was something of eternity. It was something of the Father's voice, the tone of the Father's voice that came through Jesus in that moment that everything turned on and she saw him for who he is. She suddenly recognized him. He's able to open the eyes with the sound of his voice. Imagine that. Sound affecting vision. John the Beloved, arguably the closest disciple to Jesus, on the Isle of Patmos. And John gives the testimony, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And he was in terrible circumstances and situations, far worse than any of us have ever known. You, me, all of us. Whatever bad thing that we've gone through in our life, it's not nearly as difficult as what God's taken other people through. I guarantee you that. I can take you places. I can introduce you to people that's lived through levels of persecution that we never even dreamed possible to live through. And they did it. And you'll meet a person that's so in love with Jesus and so on fire and so passionate and so... They care nothing for their own life. And John was this way, and he's in the Spirit on the Lord's day. He's so divorced himself from the circumstances that he was living in that he was already living in heaven on earth. And he comes into the presence. He hears the voice behind him saying, like a trumpet sound. This voice says, I am the Alpha and I am the Omega. I am the first and the last. And he gives him this amazing instructions. And then John says, I turned to see the voice. How do you see a voice? There's only one way that you can see a voice, and that's if you're in the Spirit. And when you're in the Spirit, you can see what you can hear. And he says, I turned to see the voice that spoke with me. Having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and one in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man. He kind of sort of looked like him, but and then he gives this description of Jesus. Dear God, you can read it. John was standing in the presence of a Jesus that he never knew. And he was the closest of the disciples to Jesus. There's dimensions of his heart. There's revelations that we need to have. There's encounters that we need to have to where we're so stretched that we're not even sure that we're looking at Jesus. He's bigger than we think he is. I'll finish with this. I'll cut this off. This is bothering me now. I have a good friend, and he and I have a good relationship. His name is Dave Christensen. He's a lawyer up in Omaha, Nebraska. And Dave and I enjoy playing golf, and we play golf together every time that we can, whenever we're together. And he came up with this bucket list of a golf course that is so private. It's so ridiculously private that you've got to have some kind of a relationship with a member of that course. It's up in western Nebraska, and they had to build airstrip near that golf course so that all of these big name celebrities like Michael Jordan, people like that, can fly their private jets in to play that particular golf course. And he's a member there, and it's like nothing I'd ever seen in my life. And Dave Christensen pulls out this magic trick and gets us on that course. And we get to go there. We're going to go there for 3 days. They've got their own cabins. They've got their own chef. It's crazy. It's stupid crazy. It's a bucket list kind of a thing. And here I was. And I go up there and meet with my friend, and he brings another friend, and we go out to this golf course, and it's actually 2 golf courses on one property, and we get there, and it's the last week of their season that they're open, and we are the only human beings playing golf on 2 golf courses. And it was like and the head pro says to us, boys, don't know what y'all have done to work this out. He says, but you're the only ones that's going to be here the whole week. You can play as much as you want to. Oh, dear God, why didn't this happen when I was 30 years old? I played up from sun up to just after sundown. Played 2 rounds on the first day, 2 rounds on the second day. The third day, I couldn't play 2 rounds. Played 1 round in the morning. In the afternoon, I looked at them. I said, guys, I'm sorry, but I'm having a hard time. I'm going to go back to my cabin. I'm going to go back to my room, and I'm going to rest. And so I went back to my cabin, got on my bed, turned on the television set to the only thing that I knew to do at a golf course, which is the Golf Channel. And there's this amazing biography of Ben Crenshaw. And in this, Ben Crenshaw is a very, very beloved golfing pro from Austin, Texas. And he's just this amazing, he's got an amazing character, amazing man, actually. And his mentor, Harvey Penick, died while he was preparing for the most important tournament of his life. And he left practicing, and he went to Austin, Texas for the funeral of his mentor, Harvey Penick. And this is all on the video. And they tried to get an interview with Ben in between the funeral service and the reception after the funeral service. And the reporter said, and I think I've told you this, but I feel that I'm supposed to tell you again. The reporter said, what did Harvey Penick mean to you? As Ben was leaving one building and going to the next building, and he burst into tears, and he looked back, and there was something of eternity in that man's eyes. He looked back, and tears were flooding down his face. And he said, Harvey Penick was a wonderful Christian man. And when he said that, the only thing that I can explain to you, the only thing that I can even begin to relate to you is this, that Jesus opened the door to my cabin and he walked in my room. from a television program. Because when he said Harvey Penick was a wonderful Christian man, something in my heart said to the Lord, I want to have that testimony with people when I go. And bang, the door opens up and Jesus comes into the room, and for 2 to 3 hours he was there with me. He's looking for the littlest opportunity. He dreams of you just opening up the door of your heart just a little bit. That's all it takes. It's just a little bit. And it doesn't matter what your condition is. What matters is your heart. When you turn your heart to Him, something in heaven says, oh yes, this is what we've been waiting for all these years. I want to tell you that Jesus is shaking our world. And He's not going to stop. He's shaking everything that can be shaken so that that which cannot be shaken, which is the heart of His love, will remain. And when we start laying down all of our stuff, and dear God, do we have a lot of stuff. Physically, possessions, emotionally, relationships, and intellectually with our occupations. When we start laying down our relationships and we lay down our occupations and we lay down our possessions, there's only one thing that's left, and that's Him. And when we start laying all these things down, we begin finding out that our ears begin to open up. And when our ears begin to open up, we're going to begin to hear Him say, come to me. Come to me. All you that labor, all you that are heavy laden, come to me. I'll give you rest. I'll give you what you've always wanted. I'll give you what you've always needed. I'll do something inside of your heart. I'll do something inside of your life, and you will change, and you'll change. Your heart will begin to melt into the love that I poured out from the very beginning. Come to me. That's all He's saying. I want to say to you that in these next few weeks, you need to get ready. You need to get ready for some encounters, because I just feel that we've stepped into a season. We've stepped into a dimension. We've stepped into a season. Something has changed upstairs. Your testimony is true. For me, it happened on September 2nd. I was in Wichita, Kansas. Spent the night there. Was headed up to do some services up in Nebraska. And my alarm clock at 6:02 a.m. was an earthquake, 5.8. It woke me up. The bed was shaking across the room. It was that strong for me. I crawled out of bed. I knew it was an earthquake because I've been in earthquakes before. I knew it was an earthquake, and so I crawled out of bed, and I crawled across the floor like a little baby, and I looked up out the window to see what else was shaking out there. And everything was. Cars, everything. And then it stopped, and I looked at the sky, and the sky was this incredible fire of light and clouds and yellows and oranges and purples, and it was incredibly beautiful. It was a sunrise that was just it was picturesque. And the Lord began to speak to me, and He says, I'm going to shake everything now. Everything's changed. And I'm shaking everything because I'm going to bring my glory to my people. And I'm going to reveal myself to the ones that love me. And I'm not going to hide. I'm going to show you what's really in my heart. I texted several people. Ricky and I began texting back and forth. And here's what came out of the conversation: that God is shaking the church. And He's shaking the church first. And so He's going to shake your heart, and He's going to shake your life. Get ready for it. I thought it was very, very interesting. And I felt, Ricky felt that there was just a certain amount of time, but I felt that there were going to be 40 days from that earthquake. And that God was going to begin to do something after that 40 days. At the end of that 40 days, there's going to begin to be a move of the Spirit of God. And that end of that 40 days is October 13th, which is the beginning of our conference in Grand Island, Nebraska. Here's the deal. He's standing, looking through the windows of your life. He's looking through the lattice work, all the things that you put up, all of the excuses, you know. Lattice work, series of crosses to cover and to hide behind. And He'll stand there and He'll look through the window and He'll look through the lattice work of your life until you begin to become divinely disturbed and a little bit uncomfortable, and God will then show you His eyes. He will begin to show you His presence, and suddenly you begin to have an encounter with the living Word.
Yes, amen.
I make an announcement today here at the end of this word. He's shaking things. He's touching. He's shaking you little bit by little bit. He's shaking me little bit by little bit. He's breathing on us. He's speaking to us. He's standing there until we can begin to feel His eyes. And if you will learn to, as quickly as you possibly can, turn from whatever it is that you're doing and look at Him, something will begin to take place. All He needs is one step toward Him. That's all He needs. All He needs is one heartbeat that says Jesus. That's all He needs. That's all He wants. That's all He's looking for, is the tiniest little, most brief opportunity, little tiny window. That's all He needs. He loves you, and He loves me. And maybe you have made some of the biggest bonehead mistakes of your life in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. Maybe you have acted or reacted in such a way that is just horrible. Maybe you even think He could never love me, but I'm here to tell you today and make an announcement today publicly. Jesus loves you. He is passionately in love with you. And He is not content that our lives would stay the same, business as usual. He is intent on changing and transforming my heart and my life. And there's something on the inside of me that has been praying day and night and day, incense arising. The praying, Jesus, please, I want more. I want to see your eyes. I want to hear your voice. I want to feel your touch. I want you to manifest your presence. I want you to come in your glory. I want to search out you. And I know you're already searching me out. That's the desire that's in my heart. Father, I thank you. I thank you for Palestine Church. I thank you for every couple in this house. I thank you for every family in this house. I thank you for every single individual in this house. And Father, I'm asking you today that you will come leaping upon the mountains and skipping upon the hills of every single individual's heart and every single individual's life. And Lord, that you will begin gazing through the window of their soul, and you begin looking through all of the excuses that they may have in their hearts and their lives, why they can't love you and why they can't give you everything. And through every single wounding and through every single compromise, I ask, Lord, that your eyes will be intently fixed upon every single one of us until we feel the eyes of heaven gazing upon our hearts, until we can turn and say to you, Jesus, there you are. Come in. Come into my house. Come into my heart. Come into my life. Come into my marriage. Come into my children. Come into my family. Come into everything that I've got. Until everything flows and changes. And that your presence and your glory will come. Until the beauty and the magnitude and the reality of your love will disarm every excuse that I've ever come up with. And will melt away every condemnation of every single sin that I've ever committed. I don't know what excuses you might have. I know the excuses I've had, and none of them have ever been able to stand up to the beauty and the glory of His presence. When He draws near to my heart, something happens to me. It changes me on the inside. Something melts. Everything changes in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. The moment that I feel His eyes. He's here this morning and He's looking at you and He's looking at me and He's looking at us. He's come from a long distance away. He's come from the very throne of the Father in heaven. He's drawn so near. He's here now. I feel His eyes. I feel Him here. Some of you do too. You don't have to stay unengaged. You can drop all the stuff. Maybe it's habitual sins that you've been trying to get rid of for all your life and you don't know what to do and it just seems to be getting worse. You can take that and you can just drop it and you can just come to Him and just turn your heart. Just turn. That's all. Something of His glory that's in this room. I feel Him looking. Lord, I love You. You know everything that's ever tried to trip me up. You know everything that's tried to destroy me. You know everything. You know everything about everything. There's nothing that You don't know. I don't know everything about anything. But I do know this. There's something in my heart that says yes to You every time You show up. And I know enough to know that I didn't do that. You did it. I know enough to know that I belong to You. I don't belong to this world. This world is not my home. I'm only passing through, and I'm only here for a real short period of time. Just a breath, just a vapor in the air. And this morning I'd like to say to You, Lord, I do love You and I do want You. And I want You to come and I want You to look and I want You to search me out as I'm looking for You. And I want You to remove every hindering force inside of my thinking, every hindering force inside of my emotions, every hindering force inside of my will. Until You build Your highway on the inside of me and that You can freely move in every way that You want. We're going to bring this service to an end. I'm going to release you. You can do whatever you want to do. You can go. If you want to go, you can go. If you need to go, I understand. Some people need to get to work, I'm sure. It's a workaday world that we live in. It's a crazy, scheduled world. But if you don't want to go, if you want to stay, just tarry a little longer. I want to open these altars up and invite you to just come and do some business with Him between your heart and His heart. If there's anybody here other than me, and I think there is. Father, I just bless every person in this house. I bless every family, every father, every mother, every child, every single individual that may want a family but at this point in time doesn't have a family. Lord, I ask that you bless them, and I ask that you keep them, and I ask that you make your face to shine upon them in such a way, Lord, that their hearts feel divinely disturbed and they turn to look toward heaven to find you there with your love. In this coming week, I ask you, Holy Spirit, for divine encounters from heaven for every single heart in this coming week. I ask, Holy Spirit, that our prayer times will be invaded by your glory. I ask you, Father, that this week, that our devotions and our Bible reading time suddenly is interrupted by the glory of your presence, and we have encounters with you. Lord, we want you. I want you. I really, really want you. I really want you. I long for the glory of your presence to be released in my heart and in my life. If you need to go, you're free to go. Services at a point where you're free to go.